St. Thomas Senate Forum, wide agreement on what is broken, from a concerned wife of the Virgin Islands. If there was one thing voters learned from the Democratic Senatorial Forum for the St. Thomason John District, it's this. Nearly everyone agrees on the problems. WAPA is failing. Housing is too expensive. Young people are leaving. Crime remains a major concern. Healthcare needs improvement. The real difference came in how candidates proposed fixing those problems. The forum featured incumbent Senators Carla Joseph, Marvin Blyden, Ray Fonseca, and Avery Lewis, along with challengers Kashief Hamilton, Peter Bailey, Shenelle Fina Francis, Michael A. Smith, Rudel Rudi Hodge Jr., Joel Browne Connors, and Mayard leader. Lawrence Larry Bosholt is a current candidate but was absent from the forum. Senator-at-Large Angel Bolques Jr. also participated in the forum, although he is not competing in the St. Thomason John Democratic primary and will instead appear on the general election ballot. Some candidates relied heavily on broad promises. Others came prepared with legislation they have already sponsored, specific policy ideas, or detailed plans for what they would do if elected. Here are the biggest takeaways from the night. WAPA dominated nearly every topic. Even when moderators asked about housing, healthcare, or economic development, the conversation almost always found its way back to WAPA. Several candidates argued that reliable electricity is the foundation for solving nearly every other issue. Senator Ray Fonseca delivered one of the forum's strongest critiques of WAPA's management. He cited what he described as years of poor decisions, unreliable generators, transmission problems, metering failures, and ineffective leadership. He called for major intervention, including restructuring, receivership, a turnaround company, or other emergency action. Senator Avery Lewis pushed back on the idea that WAPA simply needs more money. He argued that WAPA has already received significant funding, and that management and execution remain the larger concerns. He also pointed to $2.1 million approved for transmission line repairs serving St. John, a measure he said he supported, and a drinking water grant he said would expand water service and install fire hydrants in Smith Bay. Senator Carla Joseph pointed to the turnaround effort she said is underway through the Ernst & Young assessment and cited renewable energy investments, including solar farms, as part of a longer-term solution. Several challengers also focused on management. Mayard leader said outright that WAPA has a management problem rather than a money problem. Kashief Hamilton similarly directed his criticism at WAPA's leadership. Joel Browne Connors also suggested management may be a major part of the problem, although he acknowledged he could not identify the authority's exact internal failures from the information available to him. Interestingly, despite agreeing that WAPA is in crisis, candidates disagreed during the lightning round on whether a federal emergency should be declared to address it. Housing was viewed as the key to almost everything. One of the strongest themes throughout the night was that housing isn't just a housing issue. Candidates repeatedly connected affordable housing to workforce shortages, teacher recruitment, healthcare staffing, and keeping young Virgin Islanders from leaving. Shenelle Fina Francis, drawing from her real estate background, argued that traditional housing has become unattainable for many residents. She promoted smaller homes, prefab construction, and innovative building methods that could lower costs. Rudi Hodge Jr. and Peter Bailey also proposed prefabricated housing, while Carla Joseph discussed container homes and other smaller housing designs. Prefabricated homes are built partly or entirely in a factory before their components are transported to the property and assembled, which can reduce construction time and, in some cases, labor and material costs. Senator Marvin Blyden pointed to his housing summit and described ongoing efforts to encourage affordable construction while expanding access to financing. Senator Angel Bolques focused on permanently funding the VI Slice program, arguing that grants rather than loans give applicants their best opportunity to become homeowners. Across nearly every response, one message emerged. If people cannot afford to live here, they eventually will not stay here. On crime, agreement on enforcement and a push for prevention. The candidates generally agreed that law enforcement needs additional resources, but many argued policing alone won't solve violent crime. Several candidates emphasized prevention. Kashief Hamilton argued that too many community centers and youth programs have disappeared over the years, leaving young people with idle time. Peter Bailey spoke passionately about expanding the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, describing gun violence as a problem that requires mentorship, vocational training, nonprofits, and long-term intervention rather than simply arrests. Joel Browne Connors, speaking from his experience as a police officer, said the Virgin Islands Police Department already works closely with federal agencies. His biggest concern was staffing. He argued officers are overworked and underpaid. Senator Carla Joseph supported stronger collaboration with federal agencies, while also emphasizing surveillance technology and protecting law-abiding citizens. Nearly everyone wants the economy to diversify. Tourism remains king, but many candidates agreed that depending on one industry is risky. Peter Bailey argued the territory should stop viewing tourism only through hotels and cruise ships. Instead, he wants to invest in local content creators, storytelling, workforce development, and entrepreneurship so Virgin Islanders become executives and owners instead of simply employees. Fonseca emphasized bringing back larger industries while continuing hotel development. Several candidates, including Joel Browne Connors, Michael Smith, Kashief Hamilton, and Rudi Hodge Jr., promoted agriculture as an underused economic engine. Hodge also stood out by discussing hemp production, cannabis byproducts, and leveraging the Virgin Islands Jones Act exemption to attract manufacturers. Education was about more than the classroom. Senator Avery repeatedly promoted his proposal for a technical college, arguing that not every student needs a traditional four-year degree. Peter Bailey pointed to vocational media programs. He said he has already developed for students and called for expanding workforce training. Several candidates focused on improving teacher salaries, housing opportunities, working conditions, training, and other incentives to help recruit and retain educators. Another recurring theme was the need to expand vocational and technical education, so students graduate with skills connected to available jobs and business opportunities in the territory. The three candidates who stood out. The three candidates highlighted below are based solely on their performance during this forum and are not an endorsement or prediction of the election outcome. The rankings reflect the candidate's specificity, understanding of the Senate's role, command of the issues, consistency across topics, communication skills, and whether their proposals appeared realistic and achievable. 1. Avery Lewis. Lewis was among the most consistent candidates of the night, offering legislative specifics on nearly every topic raised. He cited bills he said he sponsored or supported on street lighting, transmission repairs, parental leave for children with disabilities, and pharmacy tax relief. Along with a technical college proposal, he returned to across multiple answers. He demonstrated clear familiarity with how appropriations, grants, and existing programs move through government. 2. Fonseca. Fonseca delivered some of the forum's most detailed operational critiques, particularly on WAPA and healthcare. He named specific failures he attributed to generators, transmission lines, and metering, and he identified healthcare gaps on St. John, including dialysis access and clinic staffing. His proposals on procurement reform and internal auditors reflected familiarity with how agencies function from the inside. 3. Carla Joseph. Joseph covered more ground than almost anyone on stage, speaking with substance on accountability, audits, renewable energy, healthcare, and public finance. She pointed to initiatives she said are already underway, legislation she said she has sponsored, and unpopular bills she acknowledged carrying. Note: all three standout performances came from sitting senators. That outcome partly reflects the advantage of already holding office. Incumbents can point to bills and appropriations they say they have already delivered, while challengers can only point to plans. Final takeaways. The biggest surprise of the evening wasn't disagreement. It was how much agreement there actually was. Nearly every candidate acknowledged that WAPA must be fixed, housing must become more affordable, teachers need greater support, and young Virgin Islanders need better reasons to stay home. The differences came down to experience, specificity, and credibility. Remember, a candidate can name a bill, cite an act number, and sound authoritative, and still be describing a role that the public record does not support. Voters sitting in a school auditorium have no way to check any of it in the moment. Incumbents generally leaned on legislation they say they have already passed or sponsored. Challengers focused more on fresh ideas and changing the culture of government. For voters, the decision may ultimately come down to a simple question. Do you want experienced legislators who argue they've already begun the work, or new voices who believe the territory needs a different approach? That question will be answered at the polls. Before then, look up what each candidate has actually done, and ask how feasible the new proposals really are. From a concerned wife of the Virgin Islands, subscribe to receive more updates on VI-related matters like these.